in the beginning, when you are in a big emotional state, you need sympathy in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because, for example, when somebody says, I feel you, okay, let's see what we can do about it. Then it is like, it doesn't work. First, you need to feel the connection with the other person before you can open up to look at a solution.
This is episode 8 of the Unlimited Potential podcast with Gerard and Rowen Dekkers. With today, we're talking about empathy.
Yes, empathy and sympathy and apathy
and antipathy.
Antipathy, yes.
Yeah. Because we teased it in the last episode that we were going to talk about the Pathos-theory, I guess you can call it.
Yes.
Right? And today's the day. Today we're talking about it. It's very early. It's 8 a.m. in the morning here.
Yes, 8
in
a.m.
lovely
in the morning.
Eindhoven, and we're fired up. We were thinking. I just want to mention that because it's like a little fun look behind the scenes. We were talking about it yesterday because we have a super full schedule today. And we're thinking like, okay, we still need to record the podcast. Are we gonna report? Yes, we have to somehow make it work. So we're gonna just get up extra early and we're gonna get here early in the morning, record a podcast before we have to do all the other things. And now we're here, and it's fun. It's fun to start again. And we have some interesting data you told me about. And we want to enlighten you guys on why we want to talk about empathy today and what is the impact of empathy on everything we do. So we have some fun statistics for you to show a little bit what the importance is of empathy.
Yes, we have that, and the reason why we do empathy today is that in several podcasts before we found ourselves in the area of emotions and empathy while covering a topic.
Yeah, multiple times we've come.
Yes, multiple times.
We kind of ended up on the subject of empathy, and they were like, we just need to dedicate an entire podcast to it.
Yes, and why are we doing this, Rowan? Well, obviously, most people who interact with other people, they, at some moment in time, they find themselves being angry, upset, sad, emotional. And then something happens in their brain why the interaction is not going in the direction they want it to go to.
Yeah.
And then because we talk a lot about mental stuff, about what your brain does and how the processes work.
Yeah.
So we need to understand why the understanding of how emotions work and what they do in interaction with other people.
Yeah.
How does it work? And why is it sometimes working against you? And why is it sometimes working for you?
And how can you get control over that? I don't want to say control because it's not something.
I know.
It's not something you want to manipulate in a way, but you want to know how it works so you can anticipate on it and you can understand it, and so it's more like your behavior around it becomes controlled.
Yes, and exactly, and your behavior sometimes is being triggered by things you make up in your mind. You have a plan or a strategy, and that's all prefrontal cortex, all brain stuff.
Brain stuff.
Yes, and
logic thinking. Yeah,
rational logic thinking, planning. You have control if you have an ounce of discipline. You can just go forward and create whatever you like in life. But when emotions come into the equation, it becomes much more difficult. And I know a lot of listeners of us must recognize this, so that you set your mind to do something, and at some moment of time you just can't anymore because emotions are in the way. Or
I don't think everybody will make that realization immediately that it's because of emotions, though. I don't think, like, in the moment, everybody's like, I'm just getting emotional. You're just experiencing the emotion. Most people are just experiencing the emotions, and they honestly think this is just not possible and I can't do it. But that's so funny because it's such a 180 opposite of what your prefrontal cortex does, because your prefrontal cortex kind of tells you everything's possible. And when you're in your emotional, in your amygdala nucleus, when you're in that part of your brain and your emotions are going, it creates the exact opposite.
Yeah, it definitely does. And the most of us are just not really aware of where the obstructions are.
Yeah.
So where there is an obstruction in your process to achieve something that makes you happy, and you just don't really know where the thorn is, where the problem is, and therefore the reason why something is not going in a way you want it to go to. So let me give me a little bit context on what the impact is on empathy, on, for example, work life.
We found some information on work life specifically.
Yeah. So, and all related, obviously, to mental health.
Yeah. So before we say this, we know it's work life, but in the end, we do believe that work life and personal life are very much tied. And yes, you can separate work and private, but it doesn't change you as a person. You're still the same person. If you're very different in your work life versus your personal life, it always means that in one or the other, you're being less yourself. So there's still one you. So this is still definitely, even if you want to listen to the podcast more from a personal perspective, still taking this data and you can still use it.
Yeah,
what helps.
Yeah, exactly. And we used data from researchers done after the pandemic, during and after the pandemic, because it had an enormous impact on how people perceive their own reality. And how they perceive also their own mental health. Yeah, and I'm just going to read out loud some of the statistics done by Qualtrics. It's a global study, and they found, for example, that 42% of people have experienced a decline in mental health. 42%, specifically
throughout the pandemic,
Yeah, throughout the pandemic and also after the pandemic.
Yeah.
So people are, well, that's my conclusion, a little bit stuck in the experience of a lesser mental health during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So they are not recovered yet, in my opinion. 67% of people are experiencing increase in stress, and 57% have increased anxiety, 54% emotional exhaustion, 53% people are sad, 50% irritable, 28% having trouble concentrating, 20% are taking longer to finish tasks, for example. Even 50% have trouble thinking rationally, and 12% are challenged to juggle their own responsibilities. So you see here in these statistics that there is a lot of mental health issues, and the state where people are in, it is a mindset. So they are in a mindset which is definitely different from, for example, before.
And they have it's clear. Well, I'm not a researcher, but I think we can safely conclude that people are having a lot of trouble getting out of a certain mindset, so to say, that we got throughout COVID, throughout the pandemic, because a lot of these things are pretty, how do I say it, explainable in a situation like the pandemic. We all go into a more...
That's a very good nuance.
A survival kind of state, because we're in a dire state. It triggers a lot of emotions because of everything that's happening, all the divided opinions.
Yes.
Which obviously, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, I think 2 episodes back or 1 episode back, we talked about how discussions divide the world.
Two episodes back. Yes.
Go listen to that one back. It's super interesting. We talk about exactly this kind of topic, like the discussions, big discussions, and how they drive the world apart. But that obviously leaves an impact on your emotions. And if COVID was for like 2.5 years or something. That's like being in that state for 2.5 years. Of course, you're going to get a little bit conditioned to live in a bit of a more anxious way or survival instinct kind of way. And yes, we weren't hunting deers with spears anymore, but it's still kind of a survival.
Yeah.
If you see how people were even fighting about toilet paper, which was the biggest nonsense of the last century, I think. But
yeah, maybe it's good to just talk a little bit about what happened then on the internet, on the socials, about everything that was like declining in their mental health. So people like rolling over each other, talking about how shitty it was.
Yeah.
And we covered last time in the previous podcast catastrophizing.
Yeah.
Catastrophizing. And we realized there that getting attention for something, it stimulates what you put emphasis on. So if you put emphasis on in how you talk about it, how you cover stuff, and you talk about negative things, about how shitty you have it, so people show then not empathy, but they show
sympathy. Yeah, but
So
when you feel that people are showing you sympathy, like we talked about last time, if people show you sympathy, you're going to think, hey, I'm getting sympathy when I'm expressing myself negatively.
Yes.
And then people want to do that more. And I think definitely during the pandemic, that's something that happened a lot.
Yes.
That's definitely one of the things that got conditioned throughout that process.
Yes.
You see it. I've seen it more and more because people felt more miserable during the pandemic. The statistics show that we just talked about, that people felt more miserable during the pandemic and also after. But it's logical that because of the age of social media, people have been sharing that on social media. Then they started noticing, I'm getting a lot of reactions from people being
and
attention, being like, oh, I'm here for you, and if you ever want to talk, and
yes,
but it's definitely something that's lingering.
Yes, and
I'm a lot on social media, of course, and I see it. It's very much something that's lingering, and I have hated that for 2 years. Well, hated it. Something I've been watching with my own content that I kind of refrain from sharing negative things that happen to me when I feel shitty, not because I don't want to show the world that I also feel shitty, because I do want to do that, because as a content creator, you want to share with the world that your life isn't perfect either. But I started noticing that whenever it sounds really weird, but whenever I shared on my live streams that I felt bad, I got more money. People started giving more, like, to kind of pity me. It's like pity donations. They try to like cheer you up and like, here, dude, have some money. Then you'll feel happier again. And I was like, this is not the way we got to go. I immediately pulled the brakes on that. I was like, okay, we're never gonna share that anymore, because that's gonna be very unhealthy for me if I keep doing that.
So it wasn't only attention; it was even rewarding
kind of like sharing that you feel negative, and in a way I get where it comes from, like rewarding people to open up. Like that's good. But when there's not, and we talked about that in a previous podcast as well, when there's not a strategic element behind it, how you're going to turn it around afterwards, it's going to be you're just going to condition someone to be rewarded when they share negative news.
So it's very obvious here that there is a difference between sympathy and empathy. And when you express sympathy, you just, you cry with a person.
Yeah, so let's get to the meaning of the 4 pathos first, and then we can dive into this. And
yes. But first, let's dive a little bit into the sympathy, empathy difference with when you when you have sympathy for somebody, you just, well, you roll over the emotion the person already has. So sympathy is just having a shoulder to cry on, and it is very, well, let me say, almost functional. So it's good sometimes to show sympathy, but it doesn't really solve anything.
Yeah.
The way how we look at sympathy and empathy, it's also a little bit rational. So we also look at, okay, if you do this, what is the outcome? So that's a little bit how we look at these two aspects of the Greek pathos theory. And please, we're going to cover this higher. We're going to...
the microphone needs to point at your mouth. I've said it so many times before.
So sympathy and empathy are a little bit opposite, and they have a mutual interest to show sympathy and empathy together because they have a function. And the two other pathos emotions categories, how we can say it, are obviously apathy, where you don't show any emotion, and antipathy. So where we show emotion against somebody. These two are also opposite, but they don't really have a very nourishing influence on an interaction with a person. It's just a state of mind. So you can like numb apathy, no emotion whatsoever. Obviously, it has an effect on your surroundings.
Yeah.
But it isn't really, it has not really a use in enhancing interaction, for example.
Yeah, that's a more emotionally drained state that that some people experience sometimes, especially after they had a very emotional day, and then they have like that dip where they
numb.
Yeah, where they numb down for a bit.
Yeah, exactly. And antipathy, we see this a lot in social media. So people just react for the purpose of reacting.
So it's more reactful emotions.
Yes.
Like you see another person's emotion and your emotion responds to that.
Yes, and it's just a opposite, or it is a, most of the time an opposite emotion.
It is a collision. It's okay.
Yeah, and so it's just a state of mind. And obviously you need to be aware when you are in that state of mind. And obviously it can be a trigger for you to do something different. But we all know from the previous podcast also that when you are in that emotional state, it is very often very difficult to get out of that state because your whole prefrontal cortex and your new brain just doesn't work anymore.
No.
So again here, and please revisit the last podcast where we talk about how you can like snap out of it. Okay, that's like apathy and antipathy. And
now the main ones, the most popular ones are empathy and sympathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the sympathy and empathy levels are very distinct. So the sympathy one is just like offering a shoulder to cry on. That's what you do, and you just go along with.
I believe you said it earlier. It's like feeling with someone. Or feeling, it's feeling for someone and feeling with someone. Or in Dutch, it's a super nice way to explain it. But yeah, you can more see it as sympathy is more like you are also feeling their emotion with them.
Yeah.
And in empathy, you are experiencing from it from afar. You're seeing it, but it's not yours.
Yeah.
You're noticing that somebody's having an emotion and you're acknowledging it, but you're clearly separating it from yourself still.
Yes. And the other person, however, who experiences the sympathy really thinks that you experience the same emotion.
Yeah.
So they get a acknowledgement about that you feel that emotion, that it is okay to feel that emotion, and very often obviously it feels like attention for that emotion, and we know that it then very often enhances the emotion instead of diminishing the emotion.
Yeah, and like we've said before, I think people can already make that guess right now that it's, yes, you will probably, if somebody's being sympathetic, you will feel the most like somebody understands you. And but you can also already make the guess that it's not the solution. Because if the person that's going to help you is also feeling your emotions, they can't think rationally anymore either. So now you have both people being in emotions.
Exactly.
And who's going to come up with a solution now? Who's going to like structurally guide the conversation towards a solution or a outcome, a good outcome of the situation?
Yeah, but this is a very good remark, Rowan. In the beginning, when you are in a big emotional state, you need sympathy in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because, for example, when somebody says, okay, I feel you, okay, let's see what we can do about it. Then it is like, it doesn't work. Because you need to feel the connection with the other person before you can open up to look at a solution. So you need to feel the emotion, or you need to feel that the other person also understands what you feel, and not only understand, because that's a prefrontal thing, but also like really feel with you.
In general, it's not very useful to already start talking towards a solution with somebody who's still in their emotions, because they won't listen to rational thinking anyway at that point, because they're still experiencing emotions.
Yes. And here but if you dwell in that same emotion, if you keep like enhancing the emotion, or maybe even extending the emotion, because you also add the same emotion to the relationship, you don't arrive anywhere. You just keep in the same
and that's
state.
what you see a lot, that people just kind of emphasize each other in their emotional state. They kind of, you see a lot of people go like, they say, oh, I feel so bad, and because I, it's a very stereotypical example maybe for younger kids. I got bullied at school. And then other kids are going to be like, yeah, that sucks. That's really stupid. And so that you're emphasizing the emotion.
Yeah, you even enhancing it.
Yeah.
So you roll over the emotion, and it gets bigger instead of less. So what here is why is empathy a good thing to know how to do empathy? So empathy is, for a small part, starts with sympathy.
Yeah.
So, and we have a shortcut later on, so you can easily remember what empathy is. But like, let me explain for a moment, like real short, and then I will elaborate. So empathy is feeling with the person, and that you really understand what's going on. That's stage one. The second stage is that you show to the other person that you feel where they are. So that you show it.
Yeah, and that second step is a very basic lesson in any social interaction. If you ever look up on any platform, if you look up how to learn to listen properly in a conversation, which is something we can all learn something from, I think. It's a big problem everywhere that people have a hard time listening. But one of the big tips you will see when you look up how to listen is that they say, make sure you show the other person you heard what they say.
Yes.
And you can do that in a couple of ways. Like, for example, literally copying back what they said.
Yes.
If somebody tells you, I had a horrible day at work, our brain works very simple in that way. The only thing you got to do, and this sounds almost childish, but it works perfectly to make someone feel heard, is say, oh yeah, I really understand a hard day at work. If you had a hard day at work, that can really drain you, for example. You just make sure you repeat the problem that they said back to them, and then they will feel like you really understand.
And then, even in that stage, in that showing stage, you check. You check, okay, am I am I getting this correctly? Is this the state of mind you're in now? So that you again even ask the person to elaborate more on what they feel.
Yeah.
So you have the emotion, the E, the first part that you like you feel with the person. That's one step. The second step, obviously, then is that you show that you've seen and that you've felt the emotion they have. And then there is a very important third step, and that is action. So if you have built up the trust together by showing that you feel the emotion they have and that you understand the emotion they have, that you talk about, let us see what we can do about it, how we can maybe make it better. So these three steps, they together make empathy. It's called ESA, E-S-A.
In English, it's Isa. In Dutch, it's Ita.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the big difference between sympathy and empathy. So
empathy is more structured. If you want to make it very flat, if you really want to bring it down to a single description, then I would say that empathy is way more structured than sympathy.
It has a goal.
Yeah,
empathy has a goal. So and the goal should be to gain trust by feeling with the person, showing that you understand what's going on, and that together you look at an action on how to solve the shitty place they're in at that moment of time.
Yeah, but that's obviously also why we get so many statistics on empathy when it comes to workplace.
Exactly.
Because that's mastering empathy is one of the most important things for a boss, for a leader in a company to master. Because you don't want a boss to be good at sympathy. If a boss can be really good at being empathetic, you're going to have an amazing company to run.
Give me one statistic.
We have statistics on that.
Give me one on innovation, for example.
We have, let me see. If they're only about, with innovation indeed.
Okay.
Employees are, for example, more inclined to share their innovation and like I said, share it with the boss for 61% more when the boss is empathetic.
In relationship to
the employees. So when the boss shows empathy,
and when they don't show empathy,
I
think
13%.
13%.
So that's a 40%. Well, roughly like almost 50% difference.
So it's huge. So you say that when a leader or a team leader or a manager shows empathy, 61% of the employees are inclined to show innovative behavior in relationship to only 13% when they don't. That's huge.
It's
huge.
50% almost difference. And that's purely because of a leader showing empathy or not. And you notice it yourself. I've seen that my girlfriend has worked at a place in the past where there was a big lack of empathy. And a clear sign there is that you see a lot of people they were constantly switching employees. People kept going out. People never worked there longer than a year. Everybody just kept going out, and there was such a big lack of empathy.
So, okay,
it doesn't last. Like if you have a boss that has no empathy, and I don't know if they have sympathy, but it might compensate a little bit, but it won't get you anywhere. Like that's the thing. Sympathy will make it. In a workplace, I feel that sympathy will create a kind of a fake image of of feeling like you can express yourself and grow
Yeah.
from it. And that's why it kind of tricks you into thinking that you're in the right place and then you will stay, but you won't actually make process with sympathy.
Yeah, so much, maybe, well, that's what I'm thinking now. Maybe like a collective blame mode where they're in when they together just roll over each other's miserable thoughts they have at that moment of time.
Yeah, but then you'll create actually even a more unstable scenario, I think, than if you have just a leader that lacks empathy. Because if they lack empathy and they're more in that antipathy or apathy state of mind, at least you know what you're in for. You're like, okay, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go somewhere. But this sucks. But if your boss is in a sympathy mode, you're, like I said, you kind of get tricked into thinking they're feeling with me, it feels good. So you stay around there because it still feels good. But at some point you're going to be like, but I don't understand why I still feel so shitty. Why do I? But everybody's so nice and understanding, but I still feel so shitty.
Yeah, exactly. So we think that it is because the third step is not being implemented when you have a work relationship. So,
and well, it already goes wrong earlier as well, because the opposite side, so the other side that is showing the empathy or sympathy, is way too invested.
Okay,
they're too much into your emotion already from the get-go.
Yeah, it's a little bit the same as you all know. I also have a psychology practice. So when you show sympathy for your clients, at the end of the day, you're drained. If you show empathy for your clients, and that's what I learned in just in the early stages of my career, to have empathy. So you can show you can work with the emotion of the person instead of lose yourself in the emotion of the other person. You get drained. Mm-hmm. And also, this is a good lesson for managers or people who are leaders, or want to become leaders. Learn this. Learn to work with the emotion instead of that then becoming the emotion an employee of you feels, because you can't add anything good to the equation here. Yeah. And also, one of the interesting statistics is that in this time of inclusion, where all kind of companies, because all over the world people are working in a single environment from all different kind of cultures, so inclusion becomes more and more an important topic. And when
I know where you're going, because I've seen the statistic you're going to talk about, but I was actually shocked by those numbers. I did not. To be frank, I didn't think those two statistics would end that close to each other. No, if we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, but so inclusiveness. So 50% of the people who have empathetic leaders feel inclusiveness, and only 17% of the people who have lesser empathetic leadership around them show inclusiveness. 17% only. Only 17%.
33% decrease again. That's a 1/3 decrease.
It's unbelievable. So learning how to be empathetic has an enormous impact on the relationship you have with your employees or with the people you lead in a company. And it has, I know this because another study showed that the level of which you are a leader, you don't have to be the CEO to be a good empathetic leader and to have impact on the company or the workplace you work. All levels of leadership, from like middle or lower or higher, all levels are being impacted on when you show empathetic behavior. So it's not just for the upper management to show empathetic leadership and have an influence on the company. No, it's at all levels. And what doesn't show in this research, but what I deeply believe in, is that when you show empathetic leadership for yourself, it has the same impact. So you can also show, but this is like a level 2.0 or whatever, how you call it. It's like being empathetic for yourself is like the next level thing to learn.
Yeah.
So all the researchers we've found and also what we've done are around the relationship with another person. But being empathetic for yourself is even as important. So we see that that is sometimes is being seen as like a soft skill. It's like a nice to have.
In general, we've seen that. Everything we do is around mental health and around this kind of stuff. And we notice just that everybody sees their mental health in general and most aspect that we talk about, the catastrophizing from last episode, the having healthy discussions, the empathy, sympathy, all that kind of stuff. They see it as kind of a second priority. Like, well, first, I'll first make sure this. But you need to realize that this behavior has an effect on the other factors, on the first priority that you have.
Yes.
So that first priority that you have is being highly influenced by your quote-unquote second priority thing, which is the mental health stuff.
Yes, and this is unbelievable interesting to see what the effect is on, for example, an organization, a company, when you learn how to be an empathetic leader. And by preference, therefore, not only for other people, but also for yourself. So personal development, it's extremely important to get in that new space. So where you're being discarded as a person who is empathetic, that maybe does not have any effect on the work-life balance, for example, and doesn't have any effect or very, very little effect on how effective an organization is being run. And researchers are showing over and over again now in the last years that learning how to be an empathetic leader has really, really big effect.
And we're gonna need to do it at some point. Also because of how we're switching with the work culture that we're having. In the Netherlands, it has been on the news for a couple of weeks already. On the radio, we've heard it a couple of times. You see it everywhere. You see it happening already within companies. There is there's a shift going on globally where employers want more employees that are fitting for the company and not on a skill basis, but on a personal basis. And we are going more towards a culture where we hire people that are fitting to the company, and then we educate them within the company. And we train them in the company so they get their skill level on par, because we start realizing that skills you can learn, but a person's personality to fit within a company culture or fit within a vision is something you don't just learn someone. So it gets more and more important to do that. And also for teaching someone something, a skill like that, a hard skill. And when we're going to focus more in the future globally on educating people internally in a company, it's super important to understand and master empathy in order to train someone, because you need to understand a couple of things, obviously, that we focus on a lot as well. You need to understand what someone's social style is, what triggers them, what's their challenge, what's their, how do I deal with that? How do I show and this all has to do with empathy. how do I show to this social style? How do I show my understanding to what their needs are, so
Yes.
I can teach them something? Because that's also a difference. A boss sometimes think like, why do I constantly need to show them that I understand them if they're wrong? It's not about who's right or wrong. If you know what drives someone, if you know what makes someone run faster, you need to use that in a way.
Yes, and in the last couple of companies where we talked about this and they chose to work with us was because we emphasize on that. So we got the assignments because in comparison to a lot of other companies, we focused on like getting the fundament of empathy and sympathy covered first before they're going to learn about social styles or maybe MBTI or whatever, because then you have the fundament of human interaction and human connection before you're going to learn somebody how to do, for example, social styles, or how to dive into psychological basic needs of people to make a better connection. But the empathy and sympathy structure is so important to first being learned and know how it works before you're going to learn. Well, it's not really a trick how to use and how to.
Because you also need to refresh. It's really a skill to learn, and the
Yes.
importance is so high of it. So many companies thrive because of learning this skill.
Yes.
I'm not going to name any names, but across the last 10, 20 years, especially you, and now also I'm joining in as well. We've trained huge companies,
Thousands of people,
huge companies with like hundreds of people, hundreds of employees. We've trained them year in, year out for multiple years on end. Like the company you've trained the longest. How long have you been there?
They use the methodology about 15 years now.
15 years.
Yes.
So for 15 years, this is something that is integrated into their their work culture to make sure that the entire company just thrives in with this mentality, and it's super important. Like huge companies are starting to see this, and they're starting to want to get on this train. It's the And listen, I don't always agree with the big companies, but there's one thing that you notice in big companies is that they're innovative and that they see where things are lacking and where they need to ring the alarm. And this is something we've been screaming for years already, but that's because we're in this field, so we are super close to it. But now also slowly bigger companies are screaming that this is going to be the thing that we need to do.
Yes, and it is being supported by numbers. So the CFO of a company, more and more they acknowledge that putting energy into being an empathetic leader is also showing in the numbers.
Not only an empathetic leader, because I know we're talking about empathetic leaders right now,
yes,
but also the mastering of social interactions for the employees. And also in that regard, also mastering empathy as an employee is just as important. Yes, the leader is the first step here. And then obviously also the management needs to learn empathy. And it's very important in that like higher up state, it's very important to master empathy. But also lower down the line, it's very important because everybody works with people. You work together. You gotta master empathy and social styles.
Yes, exactly. That is correct. In all layers of the company, you need to implement or integrate the soft skill of sympathy and empathy. And you see it it's not just a nice to have. So it's getting out of the area of nice to have. It's just like you just need to put emphasis on it because it just shows in not only on numbers, like being like more profitable as a company, but also being more innovative as a company, being more inclusive, what is extremely important because you need to, not really win the war on talent, but you need to be inclusive as a bigger company because other people just don't want to work with your company anymore, and you
as a company, you're gonna give yourself a super low roof of development. Like the roof, your ceiling where you can grow as a company will get super low if you don't master it.
Exactly.
Because what you'll get is the example what I said before. If you're not empathetic, people are gonna leave. The statistics show that people are more inclined to leave when you're not empathetic as a leader. And if you're constantly switching your personnel, then how can you develop and grow your people? You need people to stick around for longer amount of years to grow with the company, to help the company grow. So if you're constantly switching your employees, you're gonna stagnate.
Yes.
You're gonna stagnate undeniably earlier than whenever you have employees that stick around for, say, 10 years, 15 years.
Yes. Let me give a last...
Now we're going to go to something actionable.
Like in work-life balance. For people who have the feeling that their leaders are more empathetic, 86% of them said that they were more inclined to meet the demands of the work. Like 86% were more inclined to meet the demands of work.
Versus, or do we have the versus?
60% of these. The other side is 60%. So 60% of those who feel less empathy. So again, obviously, a lot of people, that's what I see in this statistic. Again, people are pretty okay committed to work and to see how work-life balance works.
I'm actually surprised about this statistic because in the Netherlands, it's definitely, I think we're pulling this average down in the Netherlands. We have a lot of people that make high demands and are like, well, if the company if they don't do things the way I like it, I'm going to leave. Like we don't want to adapt ourselves to a company. But apparently globally in general, we're still pretty good on that. But it's still almost, you can round it up to a 20%, which is a 1 in 5. Yeah. 1 in 5 people.
26% different. 26.
26. 26%
difference.
So let's round that up to 25 then. That's a 1 in 4. 1 in 4 people in your company will... You can just easily say that 1 in 4 people, if you're not empathetic compared to being empathetic, 1 in 4 people will leave.
Yeah, and don't feel...
More.
And don't feel that there is a... that they don't feel that they can manage their work-life balance because a good work-life balance obviously leads to a better performance.
And it's a hard balance, right? So if you're listening right now and you're immediately thinking, my boss, this and that, and the blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Or you are a boss and you're listening, you're like, but I'm doing that. Listen, it's a balance. I have also worked at a company that was amazing in how they treated their employees. They did weekly drink evenings, like Friday drinks with everybody, and we had like foosball tables, and it was a lot of fun. We got free lunches every day. Like, it was super nice. But what happened there is we still got a little bit of disbalance because it started becoming almost like a down payment. It's we're doing these nice things for you, so now you have to do this for us.
Exactly.
Now you have to take these rules and not complain about it. Like, we got a couple of rules where I was like, okay, I think this is kind of weird that we have that, and I don't really agree with it. Like, what? But you have it so nice here. We do so many nice things. So then it kind of nudges back to that sympathy kind of way because they're playing into the emotion, and it's like... the balance is off. So the fact that you're doing nice things doesn't immediately make you a good empathetic leader, for example.
No, and obviously we know that empathy should come from the heart. It should be really like you really must want to dive into the emotion of the other person. When it is a trick, when it is a method, when it feels like a method, obviously it doesn't work. So you need to be very authentic when you show empathy.
Yeah,
so let us
the people mistake that a lot, right? Because a lot of people feel like if you really care for me, you feel sympathy and you feel the emotion with me. But listen, it's so much the other way around. I have been a very, very emotionally sensitive person my entire life, but luckily because I raised in a family where we were cautious about that, we were aware of that. I trained it a lot, so I can control it pretty well. But most of the time, you want to learn empathy because you care, not because you don't care. You don't try to keep yourself out of the emotion because you don't care. You try to keep yourself out of the emotion because you care a lot. Because you know if you don't get into that emotion yourself too much, you can help someone better. You can mean more to that person. You can make sure that they get the good solution they deserve.
Yeah, and the interesting part also coming from that research is that empathy creates empathy. So it is like a inked blot. So it spreads. So when you start with it, empathy, showing empathy, it creates empathy in other people. Yeah. So let's recap, Rowen.
A quick recap, and we can obviously summarize it back down to a nice assignment, so to say.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put a nice because Spotify has a new feature. I didn't even think I told you before, but you can now put a question. And you can put a poll in Spotify.
Okay, cool.
So for all the listeners, make sure you check out the poll and the question of this episode. I'm going to put something fun in for this one as well, where you can answer it. But the assignment that we're going to have for today, that you guys can send us either in the YouTube comments or to info@unlimitedpotentialprogram.com.
Yeah,
just mail it there. It's fun. We like it. If we get if we get a lot, we can dedicate an entire episode to looking at some responses. But I think a good assignment for today was to make to debunk your own ISA, whether it be a personal situation or a work situation.
Yeah, you can just like ISA, remember, empathy equals ESA.
ESA.
So dive into the emotion with the person. So not lose yourself in the emotion, but just work with the emotion. Feel the emotion without becoming the emotion. That's step one. Second, show to the other person what you have felt, so that the other person recognizes that you have seen what's going on there. That's the second step. Third step, talk about, okay, this is what we've seen. This is what your emotion is. How can we solve this? How can we work on this? And that's the A of action.
Yeah, so there we have the ESA. Try to find a situation in the past, maybe, or maybe something you're currently in. Get that situation. Try to rethink how you would tackle that situation. Now using ESA, emotion, showing
an action.
Yes. Emotion, showing action. And with again, emotion, describe how you would do that, how you would recognize and feel with the emotion of the other person without like getting yourself too much involved. Describe a little bit of how you would show that person that you really understood it. Obviously try to do it in a way that it fits that person. So make it specific. Try to think of how that person would get that you understand them.
Yes.
And then you describe how together with that person you're going to work towards a proper solution or an action or what they can do to fix this problem that they're having.
Yes, and this is the definition of empathy. So it's much more than just offering a shoulder to cry on.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope we establish that in this podcast. So it's not just a shoulder. It's more than that. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Thank you all for listening. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Make sure again that you let us know what you thought about it. Give us a good rating on Spotify and everything. That would be appreciated. And answer the questions. That's the most important thing. We just love to see answers from everybody. So we would like to get more and more answers. and just see what you guys think and maybe tackle them in the next episode. Make sure you follow us on all social media. We also put a lot of nice, fun clips on our TikTok, Instagram. We're going to use our Twitter more soon, so you can follow us there as well if you want, which is for the English Unlimited Potential program. It's up program _int from international INT.
Yes.
On all platforms, it's the same. You can find us everywhere like that. On YouTube, you can just search for Unlimited Potential program. You'll find us there.
Yeah.
So thank you all. Next week, we will be back with a Dutch podcast. And the week after that, we will be having a new subject.
Yes.
If you have a suggestion, let us know. And then it only leaves us to say one more thing.
Dare to dream.
Dare to dream.